I'm Jeff Coyle, the co-founder and chief strategy officer for MarketMuse. And today's topic is something, if you know me, if you've been listening to the show for as long as it's been going, that I love. It's about the content that B2B buyers want. We're going to be talking about B2B technology, everything that goes against buyer journeys, questions, how to create content, how to think about content creatively for B2B technology and B2B buyers. We are going to get into this discussion today with David Kirkdorffer. Thanks for joining us, David. You are fractional, interim, advisory, on-demand executive marketing person. What got you to that point? And tell us a little bit about your career, the history of your career, how you got to this, and what your current mission is. Because I'm so excited about talking to you about B2B technology and B2B content, but I'd like to get into how we got here. How did you get to this situation?
So my story. So I've been doing B2B tech marketing for a long time. I started doing this before the internet was invented, strangely enough, or at least made available to people like you and me. And I've been focused on the B2B or B2Dev side. And during my career, we've started out with the enterprise level software technologies because at the time, the only companies that really had computers were the enterprise companies. So that's who you sold to. But as the technology has become more distributed, more democratized is the word I was searching for, SaaS, on-prem kind of went away and we went into the SaaS world, and small and medium-sized businesses now can do things that many large companies used to do. Right now I'm doing a combination of fractional work, if you will. That means I'm employed by organizations to work for them, embedded, but only part-time. So a reduced number of hours, not full-time hours. There's a little QR code there if you want to link into me on LinkedIn, if that should be interesting. And I'd say most of my work is around demand gen, growth marketing, as you can see here, ICP, persona definition and messaging, and sales enablement. My job has often been like this liaison between the last step of marketing and the first step of sales. Demand gen has been the hat that I wear pretty much in every organization. And so that's why I've become very concerned, if you will, or a very interested party in the messaging and the content that is provided by vendors to a buyer. I've, as a demand gen marketer, needed to think, what does the buyer care about? Why does the buyer care about it? What do they want to know? And are we providing it to them in a way that they can find easily, in language that they can understand, that seems to speak to their context and their situation? So that's a bit about me. Other things we can talk about. Used to play guitar in rock bands and toured up and down the East Coast a little bit during the 90s and early aughts, making a really big, loud noise, and it was a lot of fun. Absolutely.
That's awesome. And yeah, we're catching up about that, both music lovers, and you play well and I play very badly or mediocre some days. But really the cool thing about this also is when we were getting to know each other, re-knowing each other, we realized we worked together when I was at Tech Target and you were at CA more than 10 years ago. So really exciting how you've gone from thinking about things from a demand gen perspective and now really focusing on content strategy. That's what I really want to get into. So when you're working with a team, whether it's a fractional, maybe it's just a situation where they need you as a voice of reason, or they're ranting about their current situation with their team and they're hiring a fraction. When do you broach the topic that maybe they need to focus on content strategy? And how do you get into that discussion? And what is your kind of the standard, your best practices for content strategy as a solution to maybe some of their problems?
So I get into it very early. Some of the projects that I get brought into are around creating content one way or another, right? So that you can do a program, so you can do an activity. And so, as you've got on this slide here, thank you. What is content strategy? It's really to distribute value content where prospects already go, important, to attract their curiosity so that they say, interesting, what's that about? And they come to the website. That's what we're aiming to do at a first order of business. And already that's a lot. So that's key. There's different types of content you can create. We'll get into that maybe in a bit. The key thing is to be interesting from the buyer's perspective, so that you're making the content that the buyer cares about. And I guess we can talk about some of the questions that they care about in a bit. But here's this flow that I suggest is really the whole game. And if you're a content marketer today, you're going to go, yes, of course, that makes sense. So let me just highlight some of the points along here. If our content is good, we're going to attract web traffic. If the web traffic comes to our website, then we hope our website has got prospect-focused language that fits the customer's context, that answers their key buying questions. So some of you might be going, of course, David, that makes sense. So then you look at your own website and it seems to talk about your technology and you, as opposed to the buyer. So a simple kind of litmus test is, if the website is not about you, the website is about your customer. It's about your prospect. And so if they can recognize themselves and see themselves in it, then they're going to feel more warmly disposed to you. They're going to recognize how you help them. And that messaging is not exactly content, but it is. So I want to bring that out. Now, if you have good language market fit, then you can hope that your prospects will self-select. They'll say, gosh, you've answered some of my key questions that I care about. You've given me some information that makes me think, maybe I should give you guys a chat. Maybe I need to contact you. Maybe I'll ask for a demo. And they've self-selected. And those self-selected folks go more quickly through your sales cycle, close with higher success rates, and need less discounting later on. So how do we create this content? What is value? It's also got to be fun. Nowadays, you can't just create boring, long documents that are white paper oriented, right? Whether they're self-created or by a third party. But essentially, a litmus test is this content that's teaching your prospect something about their own business? Is it something they're going to choose to want to keep? Is it explaining how they would be successful? It's about answering their questions. You want to explain how you're different, right? And you want to speak to the KPIs that they care about, so that they can say, okay, this looks as if it's going to be the type of thing that will help me, and I understand why it's a little different from someone else. And then you make this content available through everything you do, whether it's a roadshow, a TikTok, a presentation of some kind, a meme, various social channels. The content that we create becomes the fuel of our communication. And really content, I'd like to introduce the notion that our content are our ideas. So content is a very kind of dry term. What we really mean is ideas. And so our buyers are looking for ideas, and we're providing ideas in different media across different channels. But what's the idea, and why should they care?
Yeah, I think you're getting into, we talk a lot, is you have to illustrate that you have empathy. You understand that they could be at any stage of that journey. They could be at any stage of sophistication. But throughout that experience, you're providing your idea, and I love the way you say that. And it's also that you're an expert. You're exhibiting expertise. And expertise, a lot of times when people are thinking about this from a keywords only perspective, expertise might mean that they have a big, long form article. But expertise actually means that you might understand their industry really well as generalist. It might mean that you understand that if someone reads article A and wayfinds to article B, it likely tells you that they're at a particular stage. So how do you coach people who are thinking about this as individual pages only, or they're keyword crazy, or they think that everything should be gated in PDFs? I know those are three different problems, but it all comes from people thinking about an asset and not a cluster or a collection. How do you get people out of that asset focused or keyword focused world and start thinking about everything they create as a journey or a collection of ways to exhibit expertise?
All of those ways of doing things are important, but they shouldn't become the primary focus. They become supporting secondary focuses, if you will. The primary focus is to try and help educate, inform, inspire, or entertain our prospects, and to give them information. As I say, if you can teach them something about their own business, then you will be doing a lot to help them understand why they should care about you. All of a sudden, you become a thought leader when you're actually teaching them something, as opposed to you're writing about the same things that everybody else is writing about. You might think about, is your content fitting into a bigger narrative where people can be joining a movement? And I'm not here to talk about strategic narrative, but the content you create, if its purpose is to help educate people, inform, inspire, and that's the hardest one, I would suggest, because inspire is trying to get people to move to action in a way. And just to point out something else on this slide, entertaining. The experience of people learning about and working with your business is a differentiator. Your product may suck. Your service may suck. Your pricing may suck. Let's just pretend. Not that anyone wants all of those things, of course. But if the experience of learning about is easier, more fun, more relevant, and I've got 3 different vendors I'm evaluating, and they're all new to me. I'm looking at a new space, and one of them makes it very easy for me to find stuff, and they make it enjoyable as part of the learning about them process, and the other one makes it hard. And the experience of learning about them is not on, or instantly gravitating to the one that's easier to learn about. And we haven't talked about pricing or product or anything. So this experience to learn about becomes part of the equation too. It's a strategic differentiator. Just say the words because it's important. If you want to go back up to the slide you just popped through.
Yeah, before I do though, I think that I really love the idea that it should be entertaining and it should illustrate that I'm in the right place. It's like you're at the right store here. Because I always like to say is a lot of times in B2B demand gen, and coming from a person who's generated 50 million plus leads, right, in my life, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to go, a lot of times you lose not because of the quality of the content in isolation or in a package, but it's because it didn't answer the question, this ain't for me, right? A lot of people, they're abandoning because they're looking at this thing, they landed on the page, and like, I don't think this product was made for me because the content doesn't tell the story that you know who I am. It's not showing me that you know me. And showing them is one of the most important selling practices in the world. And I think that's really it summarizes what you're communicating. It's show me that you know me. If I want something fun, if I want something engaging, if I want something that tells me where I am in the funnel, make sure you have that and make sure it's easy for me to get to. And I think that coaches towards the buyer's pyramid too, because you don't know how people are researching. They could be on G2, they could be on TechTarget, they could be on any one of the sites within various intent co-ops like Bombora or Madison Logic. And so we don't know explicitly how they're doing it, but when they get to your site, make sure it's the right message at the right time. And how do you get to that?
So underline everything you just said, right? If we were to stop there, and that was the only thing that we were to remember from this presentation today, congratulations, job accomplished, well done. Absolutely right. So you've got, let's imagine 4 different individuals at 4 completely different points along their situation. Let's use the word very vaguely. And so they come to our website, and these 4 different situations, how do we make it so that each of these people can find something that they say, oh, that fits, that makes sense. Gosh, okay. So this slide in front of you here, some of you will be familiar with Chet Holmes and the buyer's pyramid, right? And his thesis is that 3% of your current market is currently ready to buy, okay? The next 7%, and whether it's 3% or 2% or 4%, is the concepts that I think that are most important and the relative proportions. 7% are open to buying but not actively looking, okay? 30% are not thinking about it, but they could become interested, okay? And then there's a bunch of people who are satisfied with what they've got, but they could be swayed perhaps, and then a whole bunch of other people who couldn't be swayed at all, okay? So as we think of the content that we create, maybe we want to think about all these different places that someone could be at, our 4 people, right, potentially. So the easiest ones to think about in some respects are at the very top. They're ready to purchase now. If they're ready to purchase, they're looking for stuff, right? They're going to search for things. And so that's where PPC and ads and Google is going to kind of skim from the top, those 3%, right? And what's interesting is that the types of things that they respond to, of course, have changed over the years. And there's a lot of people who give you information about that. And we're not trying to focus on that. But briefly stated, provide the information in the medium that they're in right now or in the channel. Don't force them to have to go someplace separately to go get it, right? So that's the most successful kind of demand gen oriented ads for folks who are at the 3% stage. Okay. Then the rest of the triangle in blue, which I've got here, you're in a situation of creating demand. And different people at different points in their story may say, okay, I've got a problem, I recognize I've got a problem, but it's not a priority for me to fix right now. I.e., maybe I'm an IT worker at an enterprise account, And we've got plans and projects and project windows, and we're going to do this project in Q2 of 2024, right? So it's planned. I'm going to learn about it, but I'm not going to do anything about it until we actually have that project window that we do things on. So if you're ever marketing to large enterprise accounts, you're familiar with that challenge that they're not going to do anything until they're ready, and they've got it on the map, on the roadmap to do at this time in the future. But people are still learning about things. You can change the equation of their urgency by providing information that they had not considered before that causes them to reevaluate their status quo. I have the story of the muffler and the mother-in-law that I sometimes tell. I have a car, I'm driving to work. It's the wintertime in New England. I've got the windows up, the radio's blasting. I'm happy, I am warm, I'm in my little cocoon. Spring comes, I roll down the windows a little bit, and I hear a sound. I'm like, oh, I must have a hole in my muffler. I didn't realize that. So I've become aware of my problem now, right? But I'm not going to do anything about it. It's not too much of a pain in the neck. I can get from A to B, and I've not got time. It's not a project for me to deal with. Summer comes, it's getting pretty loud. I just turned up the radio to cover it up, but I'm getting some dirty looks from the folks at the traffic lights, right? And it's okay, yes, but it's still not a thing I want to focus on. I'm just making it back and forth to work and so forth. And then my wife says, dear sweetheart David, my mother's coming to visit, and she's going to be here in 2 weeks. And I'm thinking, crikey, I've got to fix the muffler now, because all of a sudden it went from being not a pain in the neck. For me, I can handle it. It's a bit noisy, but I can't deal with the conversation and all the problems that are going to come with this muffler problem, right? So I am now motivated to fix it. So I go off and I fix it. Great. Now introduce the notion of good advertising. Imagine back in December, in the springtime, when I first became aware of that ad, aware of the noise, that I heard an ad on the radio that says, hey, it's springtime. Did you just roll down your window and discover that you've got a hole in your muffler? You're probably thinking, it's not too big a deal. You're all right. You can get to and from work. But did you know the fumes from that leaky muffler could be leaking into your cabin of the car, and you wouldn't know it? And it could affect your brain and your ability to have kids. All of a sudden, my equation is completely changed. I've been introduced to new information that changes my status quo. I don't need to wait 4 months until the mother-in-law conversation comes along. I am now motivated because I don't want to lose my brain, and I'm hoping to have kids. A bit of an extreme example, perhaps, but it shows that the notion of if you can introduce new information that causes people to reassess their status quo, then that's what happens to that 7% and that 30%. And so that's our goal, if you will. And the way to do that is to teach your prospects something that they didn't know about their own business.
I love the muffler and the mother-in-law analogy. It's great. You can steal that one, make it your own. And I think I like to think about this, and that concept is you can't jump from the bottom of the pyramid to the top of the pyramid. So many campaigns and so much nonsense literature about B2B thinks about it like it's a pair of socks. Yes, there's a buyer journey for socks, and there's a content strategy for socks, and there's a way from get to A from B. But depending on the buyer journey, the level of expectation, the size of the investment, the investment in fixing, and then the pain that someone's feeling. The pain someone's feeling from the noise, because you like rock music and you can turn up your stereo, it changes when that becomes brain death, or it changes when it could kill your kids who are sitting in the back of the car. And that's what's going to get me motivated too. So you've got to think about what is the gas in your cabin, right, that you can create. In MarketMuse's case, right, we look at content efficiency. How much content did you publish last year? How much of it is successful? The average team successful with 10% of the content that they create or touch or update, right? If you spend $1 million and only $100,000 of that, of the content that you created, has any impact, you're starting with such a huge handicap. And so the pain that I create when I'm selling MarketMuse to get them from the bottom of that pyramid to the top is acknowledging that they only bat 10% on their content and they want to bat 25. And if they batted 25%, everybody in their organization would believe that they have a predictable channel with content and that they can have ROI instead of thinking content's a black box. So I can take somebody coming in going, ooh, I'm reading this article about SEO, and I'm reading this article about e-commerce content maturity models. And when they get introduced to the fact that they're batting 10% with content, and it might be killing their entire team, that's the gas in their cabin that says, wait a second, I've got to make better decisions about the content that I create. They're not going to naturally get there, except if another gas in the cabin moment has happened to them. So you've got to think about that for your business. How do you go from interesting to life-saving, right? Or whatever the equivalent. I love that example. So how do you do that with quality too? What are examples of fun in practice? How do you make topics fun in B2B? I've got some cool examples of this. I've got some cool ideas on this, but I would love to hear from you, from your experience.
Memes are an amazing example of powerful messages that are fun, because memes are understandable because people recognize the truth, and you're poking at something. In one cell, right, you're showing a situation that the viewer totally recognizes, that they feel there's an impact. How else to make it fun? Gosh, I suppose analogies, although analogies are a faulted kind of logic because people always can create a lot of bad analogies. I think it's a really tough question, and each of us have to kind of go at it in a different way. Insurance companies on TV are making insurance fun. If insurance companies can do it, there's hope for us all somehow, right? So can we make fun of our prospects in a way that isn't making fun of them, but making fun of the situation, that they would recognize, this is ludicrous. Why am I doing this? There's a company some people might know called Dooley. They provide technology used to help SDRs with updating Salesforce systems. And they've had over the years, some really funny ads and funny memes that just point out the drudgery and pain of having to go back at the end of the day to update the CRM, whereas all their buddies who are using Dooley are already out and having fun, right? So there's that gap that's created between you're doing this and they're doing that. Here's the gap. You recognize it. So that's one approach.
I have that pain. I got to get Dooley right now. I got that pain.
And I'm not here to say that Dooley is the best product in the category or anything, but the ads were remarkable. They're noteworthy. I still remember them. There was one in particular. It was a product demo in an ad on a screen, right? And it was all provided in a very heavy Scottish brogue. So you couldn't really understand what was being said. It was just lots of fun that way. It was a very heavy Scottish brogue, but you could see stuff and it was entertaining. And at the point, every now and again, you could hear something and you could understand it, and it made the point. So these types of things work. I think when Windows 7 was coming out, anyone old enough to remember Windows 7, a lot of people weren't converting. And then on TV, there was one of the ads that Microsoft did was a French woman, all in French, talking about how she could do things. And this is an American TV, okay? I'm sitting at home in Boston here watching this. And all of a sudden, there's this French girl speaking about Windows 7. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was like, oh, that's different. It changed the mood and energy around what's being communicated. Anyway, to move off from hopefully that answers your question.
No, but I love the idea that you're thinking about the client and the experiences they have and the pains they have through a different lens. So if someone is doing something if you're gaining efficiency, the fun one can have when they're gaining efficiencies is the key. So I think that when you think about the audience, it's about the fun they have or they can have if they are efficient, if they're more successful. I think you can have, those are the ways you build out those, it's persona, pain, success. There's fun in the success. There's funny in the pain, right? Those are the storylines. And the other piece is blue ocean content really lends itself to fun. So what is the content that only your organization could create out of your own data, out of your own expertise. So I like to ask a subject matter expert, what are the most fun parts of your job? What if you had more time, what would you be doing? What are these amazing things? And I think you can start to get creative and more interesting and fun. I've seen this in examples of blue ocean content with analytics, with internal analytics, turning it into something interesting. So let's just say you have blue ocean content and it relates to data that you only have. You could broadcast that CRM is interesting and this and that, right? Or you could take some data that you could reference that is more exciting and fun about how people use their CRM to get more time away, or I'm using the example from Dooley where the guys got to the pub a lot earlier, I believe, in the video you're talking about, or they were playing sports or something like that. But that's the way to think about it. I think blue ocean content and then also success and pain lend themselves to creative, fun ideas. Good point.
Naturally, not everything is going to be funny to everyone all the time, right? A lot of what makes it funny is knowing your customer really well. So that's part of it. If you understand the persona, if you understand their desired outcomes, you understand their context and situation, you understand their pains, their challenges, their day-to-day, that's going to make a difference. So this is the meat of a lot of the conversation I'd like to focus on. So thank you for bringing this up.
Yep.
There's a lot on this. Yeah, you're a pro, man. You know what you're doing. Absolutely. So let me take a moment to walk around what this slide is showing. So on the left side, we've got the typical buyer's journey, which somehow is linear, right? It starts at a point and it moves to another point. And for many purposes, it's helpful as a kind of a concept. You go from, there's learning that happens along the journey, but I really don't think it fits today's buyers very well at all. Rather, I think buyers are asking themselves 4 key questions. And ultimately, they want to be able to say yes to these 4 questions. And the questions are focused on their confidence of their success. Okay, this is really key. So I'm going to walk through these one by one. And then the third column here are just examples of what content could contribute information to help answer that particular question. But some content can straddle multiple questions, right? The content wasn't created to answer the question. The content exists, the questions exist, and there's a match between them a little bit. So case studies, for example, can fit across a couple of these questions. So let's go through these questions because I think they're really important. And I'd say they apply to pretty much anything you buy, though you might move through some of these questions more quickly depending on what you're buying. So the first question is this the right category of solution to address our situation? And the main question here is like in the tech B2B space, right? I'm familiar with tech B2B. There's over 10,000 MarkTech solutions nowadays, which is mind-blowing. So if you're a CMO or a VP of marketing at a company, you can very legitimately ask, are we even looking at the right categories of technology? Because there's so many overlaps and they all try to help us with many similar things. Are we looking at the right category? The next question we ask is, okay, in this category, is this a vendor that we ought to be considering? Okay. And those 2 questions sometimes cycle back and forth. As you discover a new vendor, you realize, oh, they do some of the same stuff, but they're in a different category. So you start investigating that other category too. But eventually you settle down on stuff, right? This is where Forrester Waves and Magic Quadrants are so helpful to people. Everyone might make fun of them, but if you're a buyer, an analyst has defined a category and said these are the players within it. And of course, that kind of that triangulation of where they are in a kind of market fit type of thing, that can be helpful. But any good analyst will say, just because a vendor is in the top corner doesn't mean right for you, which brings us to the next 2 questions. Okay. The next 2 questions are, as a buyer, I am asking myself, am I going to be successful digesting this solution with my technology, my people, and my processes at my company? Because I don't want to get something that could be great, but just turned out to be too much for us. We couldn't handle it, or we were missing something that is needed by it, or our workflow is at a particular workflow, and we'd have to blow up our workflow to make it work with this solution. So would I be successful ingesting, digesting, onboarding, rolling out, adopting, whatever the right words could be, all of those words, this solution at my company? Okay, because I don't want to be the guy who bought something that failed, because that'll be career ending for me in some respects. It doesn't look good, right? Especially if it's an expensive piece of technology that touches a lot of people, impacts a lot of workflows, touches a lot of our business. The next question I'm going to ask is, am I going to get an economic benefit from this thing? Will I be successful getting it? How much benefit can I expect? When might it arrive? How do I measure the benefit sometimes, right? So I want to know the answers to those questions too. And instead of thinking of it as a linear journey, I would propose that our buyers are asking all those questions all at once to varying degrees of focus, importantly, when they come and visit our website. They're not starting out with, is this good, great, wonderful, move on to the next question. They're kind of doing it all at once as the information is made available. So I've used the visual, maybe I should have had that up here. For some of us, when we were very young kids, pre-K, we might have had this little toy with 4 wooden spikes kind of poking out of the board, and these rubber rings of different color. And we would put them on the spikes. I don't know, if you've got kids, you might remember these things. Probably they're not kid-friendly safe anymore because of those spikes. I don't know, they may not make them anymore. But people accumulate each of these rings as like knowledge, and they just put them on as they get them. So as you say, oh, okay, this is what it takes for the integrations. Interesting, we have that. They've put the pricing on the page. Great, I'm going to do the calculator later, but I'm not sure I'm going to do the calculator now. They seem to have a lot of the kinds of customers that we do that are like us. So they focus in a particular niche, and look, they've got a couple of my competitors on there as their customers. So maybe they are the right ones for us. They've got some information that says how their category is this and not that. And that makes sense. It's helped me understand what's going on. So I'd love to spend more time on this or take questions on this. But the idea I'd like to leave everyone with is, as we're creating content or we're auditing our websites for what content we're already providing, to take an honest look and say, where do we have a lot? Where do we have a little? No one is going to have all of these example pieces of content. That's not the idea. The idea is just to say some of this kind of content helps perhaps answer some of these questions. So as we're thinking, go ahead, sorry.
No, just to say, do you practice that you would want to, you said it's not that we're going to have everything. We can't have everything for every persona, we try. That's why you're working with MarketMuse. You want to know your breadth and depth of coverage. You want to know whether you have it. But do you apply from the school of saying we do need to cover the entire buyer journey plus twist it for each type? So do we need in this category, is it the right vendor for us for each target market? For each, or can we get away with it being unpersonalized?
It's a great question. So let's take the case where you have multiple people on a buying committee within one organization first. And they each have their own situation and needs. So I would advocate, based on research that I've seen from some analysts, that 80% or 70% of your content should be similar, that you highlight as similar, and 30% potentially speaks to the persona-based benefits, the persona-based situational contexts. And the reason behind that thinking is because if you go 100% only this is persona for your persona versus another persona, when the buying team gets around a table, they all think they're buying something different. And that creates all sorts of delays. They need to all know that they're buying the same thing, that it has a commonality across everybody. You can say, this is how it helps this type of persona as a call out, right? So everyone can see their kind of parochial interests being met and spoken to. But I would not advocate creating completely new content that's completely destined only for a particular persona to answer that question. Now, are we marketing to different types of industries? Then within that type of question, you may want to do different things there too, because the context situation that each of these industries is in might be different. However, there's probably going to be a core set that's common.
Nice, I love that. And so I think about that I think you can learn from analytics too, to say, are you losing people who you might be profiling as they're coming from this campaign, they're clearly of this persona, but what they're landing on maybe isn't hitting them on the nose with who they are. Because I like to say that everyone I want to sell to, whether they're the buyer, and I love that you keyed in on this immediately, was, or they're a user of the solution, or they're just part of the buying team, they can find something they want, something they need, and hopefully something they love on my site, and can answer the question, so what, and now what do I do? And if you can coach teams through that, it starts to answer questions regardless of the type of company you are or how you go to market. And speaking to that, I think it has a lot to do with how you're resourced, how much content can you get out there, and how much content can you get out there, and then you can service it and distribute it. So how do you compare it based on the company? Because you work with some massively large corporations, but also some smaller companies. How do you coach them on like knowing who they are, knowing what they can accomplish, how they go to market, and how that should influence their expense?
It doesn't matter how big a company you're working in and how large the marketing team is, content creation always takes longer than you ever thought it would or should.
Right.
The bigger the company, the more challenges sometimes on the content creation. There's brand and legal concerns that sometimes become part of a process as well that you don't have in many smaller companies, most small companies. And there's never enough time, and there's never enough people creating content, because the larger the company, the more outlets are kind of saying we're content constrained. Okay, so there's always that challenge. So if you're working at a startup today, or you're working at a Fortune 1000 focused enterprise software company, you know the problem. So how can you focus? The main thing I'm suggesting is those 4 questions, and looping answers to those information that answers those 4 questions, infusing all of your content. You may even decide to do an audit of your available content on your website and say, okay, this is where we're strong, this is where we're weak, fine. It could be that some of the content you have is just mistitled, and that's a great way to refurbish the content you have. Update the abstracts to help expose the answer to this question is actually in this document. We're going to come to, in a slide or two, I think, how websites are set up that make it damn near impossible for me to find the answers to these questions. So if you, in your abstracts and in your titles, you may just want to go through an audit and say, it's in here, but you wouldn't know it. Let's just change the title to help expose it more. And all of a sudden, people love the content. We've all gone through a retitling, re-abstracting process at some point. And if you haven't, it's worth doing, because your understanding of the situation and problem 6 months ago may have evolved, but the content is great. And so all of a sudden, you want to use that evolved understanding.
The value audit process is critical on content, and especially if you're spending a lot of money on content. And I'm cutting in here because I think if you are doing this well, it doesn't matter whether you're B2B or not. I have a great example where I took a 200-page book and turned it into a 1,000-page website. But you can do that version. If you built a PDF, right, and you spent a lot of money on it, that payload may appeal to different audiences. It may appeal to different cases. This webinar recording, maybe we solve, I'll be bold, maybe we solve 10 pain points, right? That's 10 landing pages. That's maybe we matrix each of those 10 for 3 different audiences. Maybe 30 different ways in to this. It's not just a retitling, but also an exposure generator. Think critically about ways to get more out of and repurpose the payload. And I think that goes along with your retitling, because version 1 might not be attractive. And a lot of times the general becomes the unattractive. So the white paper abstract that's CRM 101, the basics guide. Okay, if I have any knowledge about CRM, that's not going to be attractive to me. But if on page 5 through 12, it covers SDR engagement. Now maybe I have a landing page, SDR engagement 101. Ooh, I want that.
Right.
Same product, different outcomes. I love it. Okay, continue on. Sorry.
What we haven't talked about and isn't the focus of this presentation is, where do you get subject matter expertise? How do you help subject matter experts give you content? These are all great questions, right? How can we repurpose one particular piece of knowledge, insight, idea set across multiple media? Those are all things that important conversations that others have had and that you need to have, of course, as well. Not to say that and the fact that we're not addressing them here is only because I'm trying to focus more on what kinds of content. When you ask your subject matter expert for a question, you ask them questions, right? I'm suggesting focus on questions that your buyer naturally has. Why is it this or not that category? What's the difference between the categories? That could be helpful, especially to someone new coming to study this problem for their company. Why does it stand out? This isn't about marketing puffery. This is more about trying to say, we're a vendor you should consider if this is your situation, and trying to speak to that. How is the integration done? Who are the people involved in the integration? What is the process to onboard? Those are very important questions, and why people go to Capterra and G2 to read reviews, because that's where you can get an honest appraisal of what was it like to deploy this damn thing. So that's information that people want. So as you're asking your subject matter experts about content, maybe that's an area of content to explore more, to create more availability for your website. And whether it's in a PDF, a podcast, a webinar, a slide, a meme, that's the medium. That's different. But the actual idea, that's the core thing here.
But I gotta go back to something, because I was actually going to ask you about this, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow. But then you got into it, and right. now I gotta get it. I always say, so whether you're in IBM and it's care, consider, choose, or your awareness, interest, consideration, decision, or awareness, consideration, purchase, whatever it is, and I always say the forgotten part of the buyer journey is in post-purchase implementation, troubleshooting, and referral or champion development. You're talking about getting into implementation as a part of the sales process. Expand on that, because I think it's the most important thing that's missed in
yes.
B2B content is you have to be proud of the fact that you can implement, you can troubleshoot, and you can build somebody who would want to give you a referral. Because if you don't, they're going to learn about it on Stack Exchange or a forum and not from you. So how do you coach on that? Because it sounded like that was part of your methodology.
So sometimes we talk about sales enablement. And many times these types of content that have to do with implementations and that type of thing are created and provided to sales folks in a sales implementation kind of way. Okay, but what we're really trying to enable are buyers, right? So let's think of it as buyer enablement, right? It's the content that helps them understand how day-to-day life and operationalization of this solution would work at their company, or how it has been working at other companies as an example of how it would work at your company, right? And that's really important, because I realize the more a solution costs, the more I want to know about that. I want to demystify what that is. So if you as a vendor provide information that demystifies what is going on and required of an implementation, who are the people, what time frames, which systems might be impacted, how might a rollout be enabled, those types of things, you're giving the buyer a vision of how they could do this too. And they're essentially saying, yeah, okay, forewarned, forearmed, now I know. I didn't think that I needed to invite this particular persona into the process, but now that it's explained to me, gosh, I can see why I would want to do that. That makes a lot of sense. And I want my thing to be successful, not a failure, because I didn't include them because it was just an oversight on my behalf. So going back, this is going to sound, because I'm ancient as it is, right? Going back to the late 90s when I was doing webinars, one of the webinars that I did that was the most successful for this, and this was marketing a B2C campaign manager. And we had a customer from AT&T talking about how they were using our product. And they didn't actually talk about how they use our product, because that was a competitive differentiation. The whole webinar was on what was their buying process? Who did they involve? What did they learn? What would they do differently? We had great attendance to that. And I've always done that kind of webinar ever since. Explaining and unpackaging the buying process of your technology might sound like that's got to be really dull. No, that's really interesting to very interested buyers. They want to understand how it would work, what it would take. And a lot of our websites don't explain that. And so we end up with this unknown factor as we're evaluating technologies in different situations. Okay, our time is tight. We have a few more slides.
The point I asked is that is perfectly dovetailed into the idea that the content isn't organized in a way that exhibits expertise. It's organized like one would organize their library, and you're expecting people to want to learn the Dewey Decimal System, to understand the way that your DAM works, your digital asset management solution works, and that's not the way it works. And so I think a great content inventory step is to recognize when it's actually a usability or a wayfinding motion, right?
Absolutely. Most B2B websites organize content by media type,
right?
Which is convenient, and it makes a certain kind of sense. Absolutely. And website after website does this. But let's imagine I'm a buyer and I've got 4 buying questions, right? And my chief among them might be, would I be successful implementing this damn thing? What's it going to take to implement it? Who should be involved? What kind of timeframes should I expect? What are the integrations available and so forth? When I take a look at this menu, this is just an average website. I'm not trying to pick on anyone in particular if they recognize it. That's not my point. The point is, you look at your own website and pull down the resources tab and see how easy is it to find an answer to the question, would I be successful implementing this technology?
Yes.
I didn't wake up today saying I want to look at a lot of white papers, ebooks, and analyst reports to try and find an answer to something. So maybe it's in the titles, maybe it's an ability to search the content that you add. It's a real challenge. From a buyer's perspective, they're looking to get certain questions answered. And from a seller's perspective, we're presenting our information by media type. We're kind of going off in different directions there. Yes.
But no, I think that it's great. I think that you've got it. I think you've connected the dots between figure out what you need, figure out the buyer journey. Now recognize that maybe your site's not set up to even get people to that stuff unless it is a landing page. And I think it's why people are so coached to buy traffic to landing pages, to start people on this journey that maybe they're not allowed to let people have on their site for one reason or another, if they're not able to influence. And I think that what it catches is, I think, dovetails really well with this slide as you describe it, and I'll let you walk through it, but it gives me a way of understanding that my funnel may be a collection of funnels.
So just a last quick point on the previous slide. As a content person, you may not have authority or purview over the website, depending on your role.
Should.
Well, so what you can do is bring the challenge to the website team and say, look, if I was looking for this information and I come to this, how do I find it? And bring them into the challenge. Help them be more empathetic. Maybe they've got a solution to this. Maybe it's indexing it and making a search capability. Maybe it's retitling the content that you have. Maybe within each media type, you create subgroups or something. It could be many things. Anyway, just to point it out. So this slide is really a summary of our conversation. What we're pointing out is content that we create at the beginning of essentially this is a journey, right? From where 30% somewhere in Chet Holmes's process trying to get through the sales funnel to the end. And this is the whole arc. And I've put it through the lens of these 4 buying questions. So we know we're creating some content that is going to help with the capture. And that's actually not so much the content, it's more the media, it's the PPC. People are looking for things, so they ask a question. They search for things because they care about it. Other content we're creating is to educate, to add information to the overall decision set that someone has that might advance their agenda. Says, oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Or it's not the right time for me now to do this because I've got a project window. But when it does come time, I know that I'm going to contact you because you seem to understand what's going on here, right? You seem to get me. You seem to be a good fit for my company, and you're speaking the language that I care about. You're answering the questions I care about. So when I am doing my shortlist, you're going to be on it, right? By the way, we haven't talked about dark social or any of that yet, or in it. And there's no time today, so we won't. But ultimately, we're trying to drive people to our website. And these, I suggest, are the 4 key questions that buyers are trying to buy. Whether they're trying to buy a vehicle, a guitar amplifier, a holiday with the wife at Christmas time, right? Or a piece of B2B tech. These are key questions, and they're designed to be empathetic. And if you're providing information for your buyer so that they can say yes to these questions, then they're more likely to ask for a demo or contact us, which then puts them in the sales funnel. Sorry, I just want to...
Wow. It's like having a webinar where people talk about them knowing things about B2B technology and the buyer journey, showing them that they understand it, and then they create a solution that you should probably book a demo for right now. MarketMuse, come check it out. If you have needs that are related to having fractional executive marketing needs, or you're in an interim space, advisory needs, please contact David. How can people get a hold of you? And by the way, thank you so much. I just want to make sure we have enough time to give you your information. LinkedIn, David Kirkdorffer, any other ways that they can get a hold of you?
The easiest way is LinkedIn. I'm the only David Kirkdorffer on the planet that I'm aware of in LinkedIn. And there's the little picture. You'll remember me quickly enough.
That's super convenient. There's a few Jeffrey Coyles, so I'm always trying to differentiate. For me, hey, I just had an article published on Marketing AI Institute on keeping humans in the loop with generative AI. Go check that out. You can always get a hold of me, Jeffrey_Coyle on Twitter, LinkedIn, Jeff Coyle. I respond to everything as long as you wrote it. And I don't mean you, David, as long as the person who sends it to me actually wrote it. And trust me, I can tell. This recording will be made available shortly. I did want to just catch up one thing. We didn't even plan this, but I noticed it during our discussion. I'm a huge Brian Eno fan, and you have Oblique Strategies, the box behind. So can you pull an Oblique Strategy for us today? And this, if you don't know about it's Oblique Strategy by Brian Eno. I have that product, by the way, behind me as well. But if you didn't know, Brian Eno worked with a gentleman by the last name of Schmidt, worked on this product, and it was about to give you ways of thinking about things through a different mental model. And Brian Eno is a generative music creator. He's a ambient music creator, and he's built probably 100 songs, the structures of them that you don't know. But the cool thing, and we'll use this to close the show, is it's a box of flashcards that have interesting concepts on them that can apply to your everyday life. So can you read one for us?
So I will. The context is you're in a recording studio. One of your clients, U2, Oasis, and any number of different bands have employed you, and you've come to an impasse. What should we do now? And so you pull out the Oblique Strategies cards, and oblique, you know what the meaning is, right? It's not obvious, and strategy is a thing to do. And so here's the one that I pulled out.
Trust in the you of now. Awesome. I love it.
I think that is a wonderful one. And you take that how you will.
Have a discussion, change the way that you're dealing with the situation, change the frame, or as we would say, close a webinar on that. So trust in the you of now.
Here's a slightly more subversive rock and roll one.
Give way to your worst impulse. Wonderful. David, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad. I noticed that out of the corner of my eye. We are like-minded individuals, and it's very clear today. And please, go check out David. Shoot him a note. Send him some feedback. We're going to provide this deck as well as recording in a couple days. And it's been a real pleasure, David. And thanks to everybody who joined us live or on the replay. I'll give you the last word, David.
Thank you. If we didn't hit a question that you have, or this is prompted questions, or when you get the deck and you've got questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I do a lot of Zoom calls with folks that are just like a chat. If you've got a challenge that you're facing right now and you just want to bounce ideas around and maybe even hear your own ideas out of your own mouth just to validate them a little bit, let me know. I do a lot of Zoom calls every day and happy to help if I can.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks again, David. Talk soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.